Welcome to meeting number 29 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on October 27, 2020, the committee is resuming its study on service dogs for veterans. Welcome to all the witnesses who have taken their time to join us today. Apologize, we're getting started a little bit later than expected. Votes will do that, unfortunately. I will introduce all of the witnesses and then give everyone an opportunity to bring forward their 5-minute opening remarks. Once the 5 minutes over, I'll make do one of these. I'll usually give you a 1 minute warning, both during your opening remarks as well as during questions. They're timed as well. So to start us off, from Assistance Dogs International North America, we have Chair Sheila O'Brien. From Canine Country Inn Working Service Dogs, we have Laura A. McKenzie, owner and master trainer. From National Service Dogs and from Cambridge, Ontario, Danielle Forbes, executive director. From Paws for Thought, Medrick Cosino. If I've pronounced that wrong, I apologize. Co-founder. As I said, each witness will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and we're going to start off today with Ms. O'Brien. You have 5 minutes. Oh, Luke.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So we have 15 minutes delay, so we will have 15 more minutes at the end of the meeting.
Let me confirm that. I believe the services, technical services, are going to be tight, but let me confirm that, and I'll get back to you. Okay, Luke?
Merci, Monsieur Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our normal time, but I'll see if I can push it a little bit. Sorry, Miss O'Brien, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Ms. O'Brien, you just need to take yourself off mute, and your opening remarks are all yours. There you go. Ms. O'Brien, can you hear me okay? You're off mute. Can you hear me okay, Ms. O'Brien? I think we might have a bit of a technical problem there, Mr. Clerk. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the next witness, Mr. Clerk. I don't know if you have the ability to mute Ms. O'Brien. She's on. According to my screen, she's muted now. If you can reach out to her, and we'll just add her to the end if we can. Up next, we'll give this another try. For 5 minutes, Ms. McKenzie, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm having trouble hearing, actually.
Okay, I'm just going to speak for a little bit here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, there you are.
Testing 1, 2, 3. A little bit of a delay, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. The 5 minutes are all yours.
Okay, well, thank you for having me come, and I'll try to make this quick. Okay. I'm just going to talk to a little bit about, how service dogs help people with PTSD. And I'm just going to speak to it as working with my clients and the things that I have seen, and some of the basic things that a service dog can do. There's lots of studies out there that have investigated the effects of human-animal interactions and that improve the welfare and quality of life of people. And one of the things that we have found that generally PTSD sufferers, they suffer from negative moods, periods of depression, anxiety, flashes of anger, reckless behavior, and sleeplessness. One of the the main things is that they disengage with relationships with others, they avoid public places, they avoid strangers, and they detach themselves from society as a whole. Self-isolation, the feeling of despair, the hopelessness that has led to a suicidal crisis within the first responder community right now. One of the most significant benefits we have seen with implementing service dogs to individuals with PTSD is forcing them to interact with society once again. We have found that many of them have been embarrassed with their symptoms. They self-isolate. So, being part of a group, knowing that others are dealing with the same issue, creates a support system for them. So if a program is implemented correctly, it provides a support system to help integrate the individual back into society with the individualized and supported training that leads to group classes, group activities, PA, which is what we call public access, and a support system with other handlers that are going through the similar circumstances. So we actually implement not a program dog, which is a trained dog within our program. We have found that self-training or owner training and having the person involved in the training has greatly increased the success of our program because the person is actually involved in the training. We have found that the public access work is even more important with a person with PTSD than the actual obedience training with the dog. So for people with PTSD, one of the main things that we have found, some of the tasks that the service dog can help out with, we have found that a lot of sufferers with PTSD self-harm. So we use the dogs to bring them back to present. We do an interruption of harmful behaviors. The dog can do this by nudging them, knocking their hands away, refocusing the person to the dog instead of the behavior that they're interacting with. Once the person has a dog, they become more comfortable and going out in public. That allows them to participate in an addiction group therapy. They feel more comfortable to go out by themselves and participate. The service dog group also makes it feel that you're not alone and helps encourage the handler to continue with their medical doctor. We've also found that a lot of the people with PTSD are hypervigilant, hyper-aware. The dog can do a block. And the dog can also be taught to recognize these symptoms. Flashbacks, night terrors are also other things that the dog can be taught to recognize. They do this by helping with tell the owner about, we can do it with heart rate increase, a decrease in heart rate, if the person is sweating, if they're pacing, jerking movements, anger, anything, any change in any kind of behavior of the person, the dog can cue in on that. And then the owner has an opportunity, once we identify these things, the dog can take the person away from a situation. They can use DPT, which is deep pressure therapy, to help the owner feel comfort. It's a pressure therapy. It's a tactile therapy that will provide comfort, warmth, and also helps the person just kind of regroup. Night terrors, the dog is taught to understand if the person is in distress during sleep, can stop the person. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, nope, go ahead. I think
Okay.
Sheila just had her mute off there for a second. That is time, but if you want to just wrap up your thoughts there, that'd be great.
Sure. So that's just how some of the ways the person can help. For standards, I just think we need to decide if standards should be established for training or if standards need to be established for the outcome. how the dog performs.
Thank you very much. And up next, we have Mr. Cosono. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir. The next 5 minutes are all yours. Don't forget to take yourself off mute there when you get a sec.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 5 minutes is a bit of a surprise considering the notes I got was 5 to 10 minutes. However, we shall prevail. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to assist you in establishing the requirements for a federal service dog standard. The best possible solution to a problem comes from asking the best questions and determine the root cause and decide on the best course of action to solve the problem. As a direct result of life-threatening military search and rescue mission off the coast of Atlantic Canada, I am a veteran living life with PTSD. I've battled the demons for over 30 years. I was one of those people who are amongst the 30 to 50% of PTSD survivors who are treatment resistant. My life was an unmitigated disaster and my family suffered horribly as a result of my injuries. The best pharmacology and therapist interventions failed to provide me with any relief. I was isolating and cut off from pretty much everyone in my life. Night terrors. Every single day at 04:30, I would awake shaking uncontrollably, totally soaked in sweat, in a state of extreme panic and anxiety. My life had spiraled to the depths of hell that you cannot begin to imagine, let alone survive. Life seemed hopeless with no way out. I felt abandoned by back, and to this very day, information in my case file shocks me. Suicide seemed the only appealing option to end the hell I was living with. Fortunately, by the grace of God, I failed in executing this terminally irreversible decision. Two factors will separate me from the other witnesses. First, I know this enemy well. Secondly, an absolute paramount is the fact that for 8 years and 305 days, I've lived on the end of a leash as a service dog handler. In our house, we celebrate Gotcha Day. The 6th of August, 2012 is the day that Ty, my yellow lab service dog, came into my life. I started to have hope, to laugh, to love, and to live again. But inside my left wrist, you will notice tattooed Invictus with a paw print and a semicolon. This tattoo is my daily reminder to myself that thanks to Ty, the suicide card is no longer in the deck. However, VAC and the CF are well aware of the high suicide rate of veterans suffering from PTSD. An extremely important fact today is that there's no known case of a veteran with a fully trained service dog who has gone on to self-harm. These dogs are a very, very valuable therapeutic adjunct in the war on PTSD. If you ask my wife, she'll openly admit that Ty's night terror interventions are one of her most endearing attributes. Ty is so good at her job, she has not missed, and she's become so adept that she can wake me up before things deteriorate. There is evidence of efficacy. Yes, they work. Scientific studies have proven this, yet certain folks keep demanding more proof and holding out what a service dog does is not treatment. In fact, you could make the same claim about wheelchairs. They do not treat the underlying injury, but they allow the disabled individual to strive for a quality of life that is unattainable without a medical assistive device. This is not an unimportant distinction. The Purdue University research study found that veterans paired with trained service dogs experience greater relationship satisfactions and fewer problems in family functioning. Having experienced firsthand the difference that the difference makes, what started as a desperate attempt to reclaim my life morphed into pause for thought. To date, Pause is coordinated with organizations like the NSNU and Ontario Commands the Royal Canadian Legion, along with Wounded Warriors, in funding of agencies like National Service Dogs for the training, certification, and placement of over 200 service dogs. Researchers have been asking the wrong question. They keep asking the question, do service dogs work, when in fact they should be asking, how do they work? And thanks to science, there's an answer. MP Doherty recounted an event where a PTSD service dog ratted him out for anxiety. And it does not surprise me, as service dogs do not have an off switch. They do what they're trained to do. And I'm about to explain in layman's terms what happened. When MP Doherty started to feel anxious, his reptilian brain, which we cannot control, kicked in. Cortisol is released into your body with other neurochemicals. Dogs have a sense of smell that is unrivaled. They can discriminate a teaspoon of sugar in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, a concentration that measures in parts per trillion. Take a moment to think about the employment of dogs' noses. Search and rescue, drug detection, bomb, diabetic alert, cancer detection, and most recently, studies to detect the presence of COVID. When an individual is triggered by a stimulus outside of their control, the reptilian brain activates. You sweat cortisol out of every pore of your body. A dog can detect cortisol and be taught to interact with the handler to mitigate the circumstances. Note the last page on page 1 of the prescriber guidelines. Cortisol and its links to PTSD have been known, but the science lesson does not stop there. It may seem intuitively obvious that de-stressing the handler in these types of situations is a good thing and a desired result. And one of the simplest ways to do this is to flood your system with a neurochemical called oxytocin, aka the trust hormone. Science has proven that petting your dog has exactly that effect. Your service dog is the readily available all-in-one solution that is both the detection mechanism and the antidote. Ty and dogs like her allow us to become aware of issues we are having and mitigate the magnitude and severity of our symptomology using our body's inherent defense mechanism. No pharmacology required. You can call whatever a service dog does for their handlers whatever you want, but effective heads the list. Ty does not solve the issues of why I'm having the episodes I do. That work is done with my mental health care team. She is there to alert me that I'm heading for trouble. So why have I been so passionate and unrelenting in my mission to provide service dogs to others? If you read my book, Further Than Yesterday, That's All It Counts, you're going to understand that all of this was to help the others. As a military leader, our troops are first and foremost our most important asset. Without them, we are incapable of nothing. However, this fight has come at the expense of my health. My unrelenting push has seen my trauma issues exacerbated by institutional betrayal, compassion fatigue, and survivor's guilt variant. And I could have easily done nothing after I reclaimed my life and broke free from the chains of hell that bound me. But nobody could deny me that, except for myself. The voices in my head will not let me sleep. I carry a huge burden of guilt and shame. I got my life back, and I have not been able to move the yardsticks and provide to our troops the relief I have got. This means that my brothers and sisters in arms continue to suffer, battling demons I know all too well. But my brothers and sisters in arms are somebody's mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter. Everybody is somebody. They're also your constituents. So in closing my remarks, you get 2 final questions to ponder. If it was your mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter, is what we are all doing enough? And would you be satisfied with our country's response? I await your questions.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comments today. Now over to Ms. Forbes for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak to the committee on this important issue. I am currently the Executive Director and co-founder of National Service Dogs. We're based in Cambridge, Ontario. Over the past 25 years, we've successfully deployed over 550 service dog teams across Canada. National Service Dogs was the first Assistance Dogs International accredited program in Canada to deploy dogs through a PTSD service dog program to veterans. We provide our dogs and our 8 years of ongoing support services at no charge to our clients. NSD values standards and has voluntarily availed itself of Assistance Dogs International accreditation process, which you're going to be hearing a little bit more about from Sheila. The process in and of itself, though, just so the committee is aware, involves a very intensive 2-day in-person audit of our programs. These in-person audits occur every 5 years, and they include random reviews of our files, interviews, and reviews of our staff, volunteers, clients, and dog training processes, our governance model, our financials. We're also required to supply Assistance Dogs International with annual compliance reports. NSD has also achieved and maintained accreditation with Imagine Canada. Not many people are aware, but Imagine Canada sets the standards for charities in Canada. We are one of only a few hundred charities to achieve accreditation with Imagine Canada out of 85,000 Canadian charities. And National Service Dogs, along with the Lions Foundation of Canada Dog Guides, are the only service dog producers in Canada to achieve accreditation with Imagine Canada. As I am sitting here with you guys today, I'm actively involved on the Assistance Dogs International Standards Committee and have been for almost a decade. And I also sit on the Legislation and Advocacy Committee of ADI North America. Previously, I have co-chaired the CGSB Technical Committee tasked with developing a service dog standard. When the standards, the topic of standards for service dogs comes up within the community, pretty much everyone agrees that we need them. We need to ensure the dogs being deployed to Canadians are specifically trained to minimize limitations of a person with a disability. We need to ensure that the dogs are healthy, temperamentally and physically fit for service, and safe for their handlers and the community at large. We need to ensure that service dog providers are ethical, safe, responsive, responsible, not only to their clients, but to the dogs that they're deploying out. We also need to ensure that the public can feel confident that when they see a dog in a service dog jacket or a guide dog harness, that that dog will not interfere with them, their property, or their business. What I have found over the years in conversations on the topic of standards is there's an assumption or a misconception that somewhere out there is a one-size-fits-all solution that will adequately meet everybody's needs, and there just isn't. Any discussion about standards for the service dog community must recognize the need for a multi-pronged approach. As Laura mentioned, do we want an outcome standard that looks at the teams and the dogs, or a training standard that regulates programs? Creating standards and regulations for organizations will help ensure that the training of the dogs is ethical, help reduce fraud. The sad truth is, though, for organizations like National Service Dogs that are dedicated to providing service and guide dogs, we can't meet the demands within the greater community. We just can't. And so that leads people to train their own dogs. And we cannot deny them the right to train their own service dog. And nor do we want to. We want people to be able to benefit from dogs, whether they're programs, ADI program dogs, or dogs that are out there. What we concern ourselves with is, are the dogs safe for the handler, the public, and are the clients being looked after? Any government or non-governmental agency seeking a service dog standard must ask themselves, do they want to qualify and regulate service dog providers and trainers, or do they want to qualify a service dog team in order to assess and verify that said service dog is medically prescribed, providing task-trained support that mitigates the handler's symptoms and needs, is temperamentally sound and safe for the handler and the general public, and qualifies as a quote-unquote legitimate service dog? By qualifying and or regulating service dog providers, you can ensure that a portion of the Canadian service dog users are safe, well-trained, supported by their service provider, but this in no way addresses the challenges of qualifying owner or privately trained dogs, and they are a significant demographic within the service dog community. And in some cases, they're the victims of fraud, unfortunately. Currently, processes already exist to assess, qualify, accredit, and monitor service and guide dog producers. They exist externally through International Guide Dog Federation and Assistance Dogs International, who you'll hear from when Sheila gets her mic up and going. But within Canada, as evidenced by the Alberta Service Dog Act, the Nova Scotia Service Dog Act, which Medrick can speak to in great detail, and the BC Guide Dog and Service Dog Act, these all are great examples of pieces of legislation that are already working that you as a ministry have access to. When it comes to qualifying service dog providers, there's a lot of great work that's already been done. Where there's really hard work to be done is developing a fair, equitable, and accessible process for qualifying owner or privately trained service dogs. What makes these conversations harder is many people engaged in the discussion are unable or people engaged in the discussion are under the impression that the standards automatically equate to a public policy or legislation. What often gets missed in the conversation is that standards are a multi-phase process. So you have standards are your backbone, and then upon that, regulations or public policy is developed, and then the enforcement pieces come on the tail end of that. The reality is the development of standards in and of themselves will not meet the needs I've outlined of the community at large. In order for any standards to have true value, there needs to be a regulatory process, a public policy developed that support not only the standards, but those engaging with them, whether it's the clients or the agencies providing the dogs. And then, of course, the enforcement mechanism that holds everybody accountable, the users, the producers, the businesses, and the public.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Forbes. Can you just want to, or past your 5 minutes, if you just want to bring your comments to a close, please.
Sure. So narrowing the focus down to what you guys with Veterans Affairs are interested, which is standards and for the PTSD side of things, I would put forward to you that there are currently already recognized in law through international standards already developed a really good framework from which you as an agency and an arm of government could develop really good policy.
Thank you very much. And I believe we have the technical glitches figured out. I'll go over to Ms. O'Brien for 5 minutes, please.
Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Good. Well, as you know, my name is Sheila O'Brien. I live in New York. I work for a program called America's Vet Dogs, which is the largest veterans-only program in the United States. If you remember Sully, the assistance dog of President Bush, my program placed that dog. And I'm happy to say I'm a founding member of Assistance Dog International. And if you live long enough, they make you president or chair. And so I find myself after 42 years working in the assistance dog industry, not only as an administrator, but as one of the first hearing dog trainers in the world. I find myself as the chair of ADI North America, which oversees 106 service dog training programs and guide dog programs. You know, we all are very concerned about post-traumatic stress as a disability right now. But it's not a new disability. I strongly believe in following up on these things in terms of history. And so I did a little research on that. And I have come to the conclusion that veterans, since the beginning of time, if they participated in war, they probably suffered from PTSD. During the American Civil War in 1865, veterans were suffering from what we now know as PTSD, but they called it a soldier's heart. During World War I in the United States, they called it shell shock. In World War II, they called it battle fatigue. In Vietnam, they called it the Vietnam Syndrome. PTSD did not get its name until 1986, and then they had the diagnosis completely wrong, saying that it would only last 6 months. You know, we know many veterans now that suffer from PTSD and how devastating it can be. But it was really brought to the attention of the world when the veterans returned home from Iraq and Afghanistan. This large group of young heroes came back, and they were not afraid to talk about their PTSD. Many of them came back severely wounded. The signature wounds of that war, or those wars, are spinal cord injury, which was up 27%. Hearing loss, 1 out of 5 of our veterans, young as they were when they went into war, suffered from hearing loss at that early age, only to find that now that they're 40 and in their 50s, it's worse, as opposed to their 60s and 70s like the rest of us. Another devastating disability is blindness due to traumatic brain injury. There's not a lot suffering that way, but there are some. Another disability is all kinds of mobility issues that include amputations and also back and leg problems. You know, the IEDs really struck hard on our young men and women. So when they all started coming back in 2005, 2006, Assistance Dog International and the assistance dog industry was only thinking physical disabilities. We were ready for those young men and women, and we were ready to place service dogs with them and guide dogs with them and hearing dogs with them. So as they started to come back, we started to do our placements. But ironically, no matter how physically disabled they were, and some of them had no arms, no legs, no sight, no matter how physically disabled they were, all that bothered them, really bothered them, and according to them, they were unable to cope with, was their PTSD. So the industry, the light bulbs went off, and the industry started to look at that aspect of our veterans. You know, we'd never done this before, never. You know, in all the years that ADI has been around, since 1987, we were all caught up in the physical. Come to find out, their spirit, their emotional disabilities were more powerful and having more reign over them than their physical disabilities. The very first service dog from Afghanistan and the Iraq wars was placed with a young man in 2006. And I know that young man personally because he was placed by me at a program in Massachusetts called NEEDS. So again, as more and more came forth, we started to hear that they were using, or they were telling us, they were using the tasks that we trained to mitigate their physical disabilities to mitigate their PTSD. I had a young man who was a sniper, and he had lost an arm, and one of his legs was very, very damaged. He eventually had to have his leg amputated, but at the time, he was using a crutch with his service dog, and of course, the lack of an arm. So one of the tasks we trained his service dog to do, thinking of the physical, was to turn on a light switch, because he liked to read at night, and he didn't have a light that was accessible, and the brightest light was above him. So if he had to get up to turn that light off, he had to get his crutch, and it was a big deal. And so we trained his dog to turn on a light switch, as many programs did. Well, come to find out, he was speaking for me at an event, and he gets up in front of everyone, me thinking he was going to talk about what his dog did to mitigate his physical disability. And he said, you know, I was a sniper in Iraq, and I'm fearful of going into a dark room. So I send Ruthie in to turn that light on. So again, the light bulbs went off. And so I started a process where I formed a committee that would look into this. Can we train tasks, as the United States law, the American with Disabilities Act requires that a service dog has to be trained to tasks? Could we train tasks to mitigate the disabilities of PTSD? And the veterans helped us, because they were using hearing dog tasks to wake them up gently. They were using guide dog tasks to find doors where they'd say, find the door, and the dog would actually pull them to a door if they were anxious or something. So
thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Could you just wrap up your comments?
I will wrap it up.
Thank you.
So that the ADI standards were based on what our veterans told us. And they weren't just pulled out of the air. It took 8 years to bring those standards from best practices within the assistance dog industry to standards. Now, the past 3 years of that 8 years, That's when we started the standard work. And I just want to indicate, when you do standards or when you do anything like that, it's not always all about the dogs. This was a new realm for us. So we added 2 mental health professionals, one, a doctor who worked only with veterans with PTSD, the other, Dr. Crossan, who was a psychiatric social worker who worked with PTSD. And by adding them to the group of trainers and ADI program heads, we came up with super standards. They've been implemented for 3 years now. And right now, our International Standard Committee is looking at those standards to make sure that we were on the right path. But we really, really did a good job with those. They've helped our VA, which only provides benefits to those who have ADI or IGDF dogs, because our VA in the United States does not want to be the ones that determine if a dog is a service dog and if it's doing its job. They also are shared with the airlines in North America and Canada, which we've been working on for a long time, so that they have an understanding of what a well-trained service dog does, and a veteran, what the training of a veteran has had to receive this dog. So my hope is that if you are thinking of making standards, that you definitely use the ADI standards. I promise you. Thank you.
Sorry, if
okay.
anybody's been keeping time, they'll know that I've been very, no pun intended, very liberal with the clock today for the opening remarks. I am going to have to clamp down a little bit during the questions, so I apologize in advance. My job is basically chief interrupter, and got to keep things moving. So up first for questions, we have MP Broussard for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, you have been very liberal with the time, and I certainly appreciate that on behalf of those that are here today. And I also want to say, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. I know the scheduling at this time of year can be tight, but for having all 4 of these witnesses here today for effectively an hour and 45 minutes is critical. Mr. Cousineau, I want to go right to you. We've heard throughout the study of the committee, the last 2 sessions, the difficulty that has come up with developing a national service standard, a made in Canada national service standard. CGSB has pulled back. Veterans Affairs has had their input. We've heard from other witnesses how there was no agreement and everybody was trying to come together, and then eventually things broke down. I want to ask you, sir, how do we get to a Canadian national standard, and what does that look like? You're on mute. Medrick, you're on mute. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Broussard. I'm thankful this committee is meeting virtually, and it means that Ty and I do not have to run the gauntlet of getting from here to Ottawa with no less than 6 major regulatory hurdles that we would have to face from planes, trains, automobiles, airlines, hotels, motels. Ladies and gentlemen, you and the committee are in the position to significantly advance the rights for Canadians and veterans with disabilities across this country now and well into the future. And we desperately need a national standard that protects the disabled individual and their service dogs while providing oversight and stopping unscrupulous or unqualified businesses from capitalizing on an opportunity they perceive, while simultaneously protecting the public from abuses. You must ensure the establishment of a Canadian federal standard for service dogs. But you cannot, and I repeat, cannot invite back to the table any individuals or groups who deliberately sabotage the first attempt at national standards. A self-appointed subversive group took CGSB's work product to the Standards Council of Canada and succeeded in creating such a toxic environment that the impasse that CGSB was confronted with was an inevitable conclusion. They set out to derail the process and successfully did so. Even more stunning is that the Deputy Minister of VAC was apprised in writing months before the implosion that this would happen. He acknowledged and he did nothing to prevent what transpired. And that may seem like a shocking position. And I will be forwarding to the clerk this pile of supporting emails as an annex to these remarks. I wrote those emails. But you need to ATIP the Standards Council of Canada and the folks on the complaint committee. They have forfeited any right to be a part of this process. Some of those same individuals are attempting to use a private enterprise to produce a standard which they want to offer to the government as a done deal solution. You absolutely cannot let that happen. Do not fall for that, and you need to know the facts. Third-party objective standards should involve the government offices of Accessibility Standards Canada, paired with the standard experts at CGSB, free from the impediments of obstructionists to produce a national standard that will be adopted on a federal level. CGSB has produced a standard. There's little work remaining to be done. Provinces need to become involved to provide unimpeded interprovincial reciprocity. The standard needs to encompass 3 parts. First is a universal public access test. Second is a part that the subject matter experts will provide, which is the skills and testing for each subset of dogs. And the third is the SRO regulatory oversight piece that Danny Forbes has referred to in her testimony as to what's required if you become a member of an organization like ADI. The short version is we have no national standards, even though Seamus O'Regan pledged in the House of Commons on the 18th of April, or sorry, just after the 18th of April, 2018, that we would have national service dog standards by the fall of 2018. And to date, nothing has been done. Does that hopefully clarify things a little, John?
It does. Thank you for that, Medrick. How much time have I got, Mr. Chair?
About 1:30, John.
Okay. Phil Ralph was here from Wounded Warriors, Medrick, and he spoke highly of the work that you and Jocelyn have done, Jocelyn, your spouse. Now, you developed as well the Wounded Warriors Canada prescriber guidelines in a minute. How does that integrate with the national standards that you spoke about?
Well, actually, the national standards and the prescriber guidelines virtually go hand in hand. And I helped develop those with Christine Anderson, a registered psychologist from Alberta, because we were confronted with getting prescription letters that were completely useless. So-and-so needs an emotional support animal. I'm sorry, that's no good. Same with service dog, no, we need to know the task training. And if you review the tables and the decision-making trees in the prescriber guidelines, you will find out that you take a properly written prescription and pair it with a service dog school that can produce the required output to meet the terms of the prescription. You then have the actual piece that you need. And, that's really, really important. They were basically put in place so that medical professionals, and I don't want to knock them, but they don't understand what these dogs do. Just like I go back to that question, if you haven't asked the right question, how the heck can you get the answer? How can you say there's no efficacy when you really don't even know what they do?
Thank you, sir.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. That's
Thank you, Chair. We understand. Thank you.
No, thank you. Up next, we have MP Sampson for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses today for their presentation. It's so important, and we only have 4 meetings, so we need to get the task as quickly as possible, and we have key people to help us there. I want to welcome, of course, Medrick, constituents of mine, which I've known now for about 6 years, and thank him for the conversations we've had when he had his service dog tie with him, because I personally experienced some individual supports and how the dog was able to calm the situation and deal with any issues, and Medrick was able to tell me about the nightmares and how the dog was able to help him and even wake him up before an event would take place. And I want to thank him and his wife Jocelyn, of course, for their work co-finding the pause for thought, which is extremely important. And I'd like to share with the committee that of course, Medrick played a big role in having Dominion Command at the convention in Edmonton, Alberta, approve resolution allowing 25% up of the funds for puppy funds to help as well. He just received, I believe in February, the Meritorious Service Medal from the Governor General. And of course, he indicated his book, which I have a copy of, and he signed it personally for me, and I've had the opportunity to read. So very important information on that front, and thank him because that helps many people. As he indicated, it's about helping people. I have a number of questions, but time is moving. And I know Brassard asked one that I might have asked about that study, so I won't go there. But I guess the main question I want to touch is, what would the consequences be of using, Medrick, the adopted standard from Wounded Warriors if Veteran Affairs was to adopt those tomorrow morning? What would be the advantages and disadvantages? Your mic, Medrick.
Yep, you just need to put your, there you go, sir.
Okay, sorry, it appeared, anyway. We could actually take what the government of Canada is currently doing through the Veterans Family Wellbeing Fund, which is supporting Wounded Warriors Canada's service dog program, although it's at a very small undertaking. Wounded Warriors Canada, because they use the prescriber guidelines, because they adopted either ADI, their programs have to be ADI or compliant with any provincial regulatory body, which currently is BC, Alberta, and Nova Scotia. Interesting to note that Nova Scotia did not reinvent fire. They absolutely went out to BC and said, we want to use the standard and the work that you've done. How do we do this? And they said, we'll just sub-license it to you. And they did. And literally, they brought the entire program across the country. Now, it is key to note that this is the public access portion that is primarily covered in the BC legislation. However, the legislation has been upheld by the BC Human Rights Courts, and it's a model that works. You can literally take an off-the-shelf solution. So what does that look like? The Government of Canada pledges to Wounded Warrior an enhanced funding commitment over a 5-year period, because that will allow the underlying programs to ramp up their capacity. You could tell us you want service dogs tomorrow and that you're going to fund them, and we're all going to look at you and say, isn't that wonderful? Where are we getting them? Because there is a lead time, and we use that lead time to solidify the position that Wounded Warriors programs will adopt the national standards that are developed. And since all that work has been done at CGSB, the most frustrating part is to know how close we were and to see it exploded literally on the goal line when we went to push it over. It causes me to lose sleep at night, because this is what has impeded this program. Keep in mind, the standards blew up in April of 2018, 3 years ago. Please tell me what's been done, because I think the answer is not much. So we can take a solution and literally start implementation as soon as tomorrow morning if the committee could push this football over the goal line. Thanks, Darrell.
Chair, how much time do I have? Well, anyway, I'm losing time by asking the question. Medrick, listen, many people have said how important it is to achieve national standards for service dogs. In your personal opinion, a minute, tell me, please.
If we had national service dog standards, I would have the same response no matter which airline I phoned. Every single airline I phone has a different response to what is required for me to fly with my service dog. You would think that even though there's things like accessibility laws and disability acts across this country, it is a unregulated, uncontrolled patchwork with no interprovincial reciprocity. That means that if your driver's license in Nova Scotia is good in BC and vice versa, it should be the same for service dog standards. These are imperative to protect the handlers and to protect the public at large. Both sides need to be protected. So this is a problem that affects the entire country, not just disabled service dog handlers.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Mr.
Medrick,
Sampson. Thank you.
for that information. And it's a good point because the Nova Scotia Act that Medrick played a very important role. If we had that right across the country, it would help them a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have MP Desilets for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all our witnesses, and hello, colleagues. My first question is for Mr. Cousineau. First, thank you for your service, Mr. Cousineau. At the end of your 5 minutes presentation, you left us with a question that has been addressed somewhat, but this is a tremendous opportunity for me to ask you to elaborate on this. Do you believe that your country's response is adequate and up to the task?
Merci, je vais répondre.
Thank you. I'll respond in English, if I may, because this is such a crucial issue.
First off, it is our country. It is every single one of us that are on this call today, with the exception of Mrs. O'Brien, and I'm sure she's right there with us in spirit. We need to do better for our disabled individuals. And I'm going to harken back to that point where I said that 30 to 50% of the people are treatment resistant. That means that the very best pharmacology and interventions that VAC is currently employing leaves, let's just cut it in half, 40% of the disabled PTSD population as treatment resistant. So rather than explore options that would allow them to get the kind of relief from the hell that we're in, they just throw up their hands and say, sorry, we need more proof, we need more efficacy. MP Doherty has proved it. MP Sampson has talked about it, and there are others in this room, in the room today listening to this, who have seen what these amazing dogs can do. There is absolutely no reason to look at them as being anything other than a wheelchair for my mind. It is my medical assistive device. Now, I know some people do not like it when I refer to my floppy-eared, brown-eyed, loving, wet-nosed partner as a medical assistive device. However, when she's off duty, she is my I love her to bits goofy girl. When she's on, she is on and she works. So really what we need to ask all of ourselves, okay, is the people that are suffering, the people that are treatment resistant, the people that really need the kind of help to get out of the hell that I know that they live in, it's available. It is available to this committee to push that forward, because you have the power to say, sorry, our answer has not been good enough. It is not what the people like me who are suffering a hell, like I said, that you cannot even begin to imagine. You talk to Danny Forbes, you talk to Mrs. McKenzie, you talk to Miss O'Brien. They are going to tell you what these handlers have experienced. But you know what? Don't bother to ask them, and don't even bother to ask me or the hundreds of people like me that have a service dog. Do you know who you really need to ask? Go ask their family members. They're the ones who live with us. They're the ones who know what it's really like. Ask them. And I can guarantee you those answers, and I have some of them and I can forward them, will prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt we can and must do more. Hopefully that helps.
En partie.
Well, it does in part. If you have anything else to tell us as elected officials, we will act. You spoke a lot about service dogs and and that is normal. It's the topic of the day. But how would you like us to take action? Get more money? Have more national standards? Make sure there are more dogs available concretely?
So in September of 2016, I addressed an email to Veterans Affairs Canada, which I will then forward to the clerk, and it was called the Service Dog Tsunami. And I outlined the implications of not having national standards and the size of the supply and demand problem. John Barrett, Professor Emeritus of Mathematics from the Royal Military College of Canada, worked on the supply-demand equation. And his answer to me after 6 solid months was, this equation is unsolvable, but it does not mitigate our obligation for doing the very best we can. And that's what we have to do. So you combine the money, which is the political will, and I'm sorry, along with the commitment to provide standards, and we get on with this. Enough. Rome has burned, Nero has fiddled. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, in the same vein, in your opinion, do in Quebec and Canada we currently have enough service dogs to meet needs?
A very brief answer, please.
Absolutely not.
That's brief. You have a few seconds left, Luke.
Merci.
All right. There are reasons why we've partnered with certain schools out of the United States, and they've done a yeoman's job in providing dogs. My girl comes from a program in Kansas. This problem is huge. And unfortunately, certain industry players have been too busy trying to carve out their niche so that they can literally say that they are the ones who provided the national standard, or they did this, or they did that. You know what? I don't care. Because what we need is a solution to the thousands of people who need the kind of help that we're talking about.
Thank you. Now over to MP Blaney for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank everyone for your testimony here today. For me, this is a really important issue because I've worked with veterans who have been denied housing because there is no national standard. So people say that's just your pet. And, you know, the reality that I hear from those veterans is that they can't walk out that door unless their pet is with them. And that's what really concerns me. And so when I look at all of these challenges, and I think they're all important, like we need to have a standard so that people can get on a plane with their service animal and be able to travel as they need to. We need to make sure that we don't have, you know, veterans choosing to be homeless because they can't find a place to live that will allow them to bring their service dog. So this is my challenge, and it's different province to territory. So I'm just wondering if I could come to you first, Mr. Quizzino. Could you just speak to what the lack of this support really means for veterans who, I mean, I think you've highlighted it perfectly. These dogs fundamentally change your life, allow you to have one, which I think as somebody who served our country should be absolutely necessary. And how would having some sort of format that made space for these important service dogs to be recognized, what would that do for veterans across our country?
Thank you, MP Blaney. In short, it would make headaches and problems go away. For the people who are involved with providing service dogs and dealing with people with PTSD, we suffer from, first off, we don't trust anybody, and a disproportionate number of us have anger issues, which result in a thing called SIR, situationally inappropriate response. And we got them in droves. Knowing that we have the full backing of the legislation of this country at a federal level, so that whether I am in St. John's, Newfoundland, Taliok, Nunavut, or Victoria, BC, I know what the rules are, I know what my rights are, and we can educate every Canadian as to exactly how that is. And that uniformity is absolutely paramount. To hear that a service dog and the lack of understanding of how to deal with an individual with a serious disability in such a complex manner does not surprise me, because the easy answer is no. Then you don't have to do anything except for the poor guy or gal who is at risk of becoming homeless over something that should be a fundamental right. And that needs to be addressed. And unfortunately, no matter how much I have been able to try and push this peanut up the hill, it keeps rolling back down. People like Danny, and they know, because they have been involved in this for decades. Okay. And I really think you need to defer to people like ADI, who operates in 80 plus countries. I mean, this isn't a cottage industry that Mrs. O'Brien thought up in her basement last weekend because she was bored. Okay. This goes back decades. All right. And that's the thing. We have these standards that exist. The problem is we don't have them because of that group that I told you that literally took this thing off the rails. And that is unconscionable.
Thank you. So if I could come to Ms. O'Brien, then I have a question. I'm still trying to grapple with all of the testimony that we've received, but I'm just wondering if you could talk about your organization. And do you have training standards for dogs, or do you have a code of conduct for trainers? And if you could explain to the committee a little bit about what the difference is so that we better understand that, it would be extremely helpful.
So are you talking about America's Vet Dogs, or are you talking about ADI North America?
ADI.
ADI. ADI has a book of standards that deal not only with dog training, but also deal with how we treat clients, Pardon?
You're okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay. How we treat clients, how we do follow-up, how we figure out if a veteran is ready. You know, that's part of the process. A lot of veterans want dogs, but they're not necessarily ready for dogs. We have a mental health component to this. Every program in ADI that becomes accredited must adhere to these standards. They're checked every 5 years.
And are they reviewed by a third party?
No, it's
just a brief answer, please.
Peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer. But they are reviewed by an ARC committee, an accreditation review committee. So ADI, as well as its sister organization, IGDF, which deals with guide dogs and people who have guide dogs, we review every single person, every single program to make sure they're doing those standards. So it takes the onus off of a VA or the airlines. You know, it takes the onus off it because we know what we're doing. ADI was founded in 1986, actually. We've had standards since 1987. We evolved them. You know, as PTSD came to the fore in the 2000s, the mid 2000s, we created standards for that. You know, as things change, because it's a fluid industry, people's needs change, we change those standards to meet those needs. The standards are reviewed, as I said previously, for the last 2 years. The International Standards Committee is reviewing those standards for PTSD, just to make sure we haven't forgotten anything or we have to change something.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, we got to move on. Up next, we have MP Wagenthal for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for appearing today. Ms. O'Brien, as I listened to you describe ADI, I am very impressed. And you mentioned also about how you've added 2 mental health professionals to your team in dealing with what you're dealing with. And I have to say that very much of what you're referring to, I find within the organization Odemius, who has received multiple funding opportunities from 2 universities where they work with the psychiatrist as well as the researchers. And what you're saying is very affirmable. One of them mentioned that having worked for 25 years with Odemius, screening by mental health professionals is really important to determine a veteran's readiness for a service dog and what the goals are going to be that the dog's going to meet. And they pair the veteran with that dog right at the very beginning to team train, as you're probably aware of that term, training with their puppy, becoming second nature to care for each other and build that sense of trust that they then need to go out into the public. So I would like you to just speak very briefly to how important that is, that sense of complete confidence and team within that relationship of the dog and the veteran that then would spill over into the effectiveness of their training.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. A matter of fact, in the United States, there's an act called the PAWS Act, PAWS, which just passed the House, and that is for therapy for veterans doing the same thing that you just described your organization does, where the veteran actually trains service dogs overseen by professional trainers.
Yeah.
It's a long process.
Thank you. You're answering my question really well. I just want to be able to have a couple of others. I apologize. The time goes way too quickly. Medrick, thank you so much for being here today. And I'd just like some clarification with Wounded Warriors and the role that you're suggesting they have and they would play to a greater extent. How are they, what is their role? What is it that Wounded Warriors actually does? And if you can say it as concisely as possible.
Wounded Warriors provides organization, oversight, and ensuring that member programs comply with standards.
Okay, quick question. Where did they get that professional ability to determine whether or not they're complying with the standards? How are they qualified to do that?
Well, there was previously, before my injury set me down, my email address was thedogfather at Wounded Warriors Canada. Because of my involvement in both placing, funding, pairing, the one thing I have not done, can't do, and will not do to this day is train a service dog. I don't have the skills. I was barely competent to be able to hang on to the end of the leash.
So how do you get the service dogs that you've provided? 200 dogs? I don't remember. Was it 200 that you've?
More than 200.
So at what point do you tie them to a veteran? How does that work for you?
So there's a variety of different models that are used. Some are the fully trained model as per what National Service Dogs and ADI programs are doing. There are some programs that are doing the owner train participatory model. However, you must be aware, and it's highlighted in the prescriber guidelines, of the inherent danger of attempting to take a person with serious mental health issues, pair them with a dog of unknown provenance, and get them to the finish line in the service dog world. Because if they fail, which there is a fairly large possibility thereof, you have literally reinforced failure for a veteran who is struggling. And you can't have that.
Yeah, and I agree with you entirely, because there's nothing more important than that they succeed. So what is the best approach to enable that? So when you're securing these dogs, my concern as well is, what is this costing the veteran? I know with Odamus, there's no cost to the veteran, and they are not in a circumstance where failure is an option. If that dog doesn't work, it doesn't happen. So what does it cost?
So basically, ADI programs do all of their funding separate of the requirement of placing the dog. The dog being intaked into a program through Wounded Warriors Canada does not bring with it a financial obligation other than the care and upkeep of the service dog. And we highly recommend that handlers insure their pets or their service dogs with pet insurance, so that they're not faced with potentially crippling medical expenses surrounding their dog. That's a huge issue and something that has to be addressed as part of this overall program. Service dogs are too valuable to let slip for literally the inability to pay a veterinarian's bill. However, the reason that my wife and I did what we did,
I just have a question on. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Not afford
sorry.
Ty when I got her. The Royal Canadian Legion made her possible.
Okay, that's what I. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Up next, we have MP Casey for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to bring Ms. McKenzie and Ms. Forbes into the discussion here. Ms. McKenzie, in your opening remarks, there were a couple of things that you said that I'd like to probe a little further. First, you mentioned about a dog not being a program dog and the importance of the differentiation between owner training and self-training. And the other thing that you said, and your colleague, Ms. Forbes, also focused on as well, was standards for training versus standards for outcomes. So I'd like to hear you elaborate a bit more on those 2 points, if you would, please, and then I'm going to go to you, Ms. Forbes.
Okay, sure. One of the things, and I agree with Danielle and Sheila, the standards don't need to be created. They've been created for a long time. ADI has standards, IGDF, which is the International Guide Dogs, and International Association Assisted Dogs. They all have standards. They're all fairly similar. I think it's important to realize that I am not an ADI accredited trainer. And one of the reasons why I am not is because I am not a charity. I am a nonprofit, but I do have clients that are willing to pay for their dogs. So they pay for their dogs. And right now it's such, there is lots of trainers out there that are following the standards. And doing the training. Like my teams have gone, they've been tested, they've passed, like we have gone to court and our dogs have won decisions. We've gone to BC, our dogs have passed all the accreditation. We do follow those standards. Standards, I think it's also important to understand that standards won't stop fake or poorly trained service dogs. We need, more importantly than having the standards, they need to be enforced, and they have to be regulated by testing and licensing the team. You could open up and get more dogs available to people if you allowed other trainers within Ontario, within Canada, to be able to utilize their dogs. But there has to be some kind of testing to say that they are following the correct standards, and that the outcome, the handler, the team are meeting that criteria. I think that's one of the most important things.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, finish your thought. I thought you were done.
No, I guess I think I answered your question.
Yes, I thought so too. Thank you for that. Ms. Forbes, one of the things that Ms. McKenzie just said that I hope you'll be able to help me with is that she is not ADI certified because she's not a charity. And based on all the committees on which you sit, I know you know this space very well. Why is it that the ADI certification only works for charities?
Part of, and Sheila can speak to this as well. Currently under ADI situation, you have to be a registered charity within your, whether it's in the US, Canada, or around the world, whatever the equivalence is, in order to apply and become, go through the process and become a member of Assistance Dogs International. It's my understanding that the International Guide Dog Federation only requires a nonprofit. So Sheila can talk more to those pieces specifically than I can. Into where ADI is going in the future, into making it a little bit broader perhaps. But certainly there is room in the space for, and you want to be ethical too, right? There's a transparency issue. As charities, our financials are transparent. We have a level of transparency that's not necessarily available if you have a private company you're dealing with. There's a lack of transparency. And having charities or nonprofits automatically builds in a level of transparency into the process.
And I think that's what you talked about in terms of being accredited by Imagine Canada.
That's
right.
If
I could get you to react to something else as well. We heard something from Mr. Cousineau that I found quite troubling, that the process towards developing a national standard was sabotaged by an organization that was pursuing their own self-interest. You indicated that you're on the CGSB technical committee. What would be your reaction to that sort of news. Can you expand upon it at all?
That's unfortunately time, but I'll allow for a brief answer, please.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
So on that front, I'm going to leave Medrick's personal take on all of that to himself. As the co-chair of the committee, I can tell you that where we fell down is not in the standard in and of itself, but how it was going to be administered. The policy piece is what scared people. The standard was one thing, but they were afraid of how it was going to be built into legislation and policy and how that would impact the lives of the users and perhaps infringe on their human rights. And it was the CGSB's not their job to develop the policy pieces and the regulatory pieces. So there was no direct answer to those questions, which made people even more fearful of the process moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And up next, we have MP Desilets for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Ms. O'Brien. We know that it's very expensive to raise a dog. Once the dog is raised, it is given or sold to the veteran, depending on the location. We know that in some countries, like as Australia, all of that is reimbursed. Now, what about the US government, US administration? Does the United States offset the cost of the dog and everything that's involved with the dog thereafter? The floor is yours.
Not at all. Not at all. The US does not pay for any type of service or guide dog. However, the Veterans Administration, if you are a veteran who was honorably discharged, does provide veterinary health benefits for the dog if it's an ADI or IGDF accredited dog. But no, the government does not pay for the dogs. I'm talking right now when I brought up the PAWS Act, that is some funding that is still on the House floor. So if it comes to fruition, we'll be very lucky. Some programs will get funding. But no.
Vous voulez dire, okay, donc.
I see. So the cost of service dogs, in fact, the veterinary costs may be reduced only.
For veterans. Only for veterans. Not
Perfect.
for civilians.
Parfait.
I see. Okay, my next question. We had questions about supply and demand when it comes to dogs. Mr. Cousineau, among others, in your opinion, well, you said earlier that there was a shortage of dogs, but is the trend such that we're about to strike a balance between supply and demand, or is it looking bad? And Ms. McKenzie, thereafter, I'd like to hear your input. We don't have much time. Thank you.
A brief answer from Medrick, and then I'm afraid that's time.
The short answer is we are behind and getting behinder every single day. The cases of new PTSD being diagnosed exceed the capacity for us to provide service dogs. That's a known. And I really don't know how to address it other than the fact that we just got to ramp up capacity and get on with it.
Thank you. And up next, we have MP Blaney for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. O'Brien ended her question talking about, or ended her answer to my question, talking about making sure that veterans are ready for the dogs. So I'm just wondering if that did come up in other testimony about one of the concerns being having a dog placed and a service dog placed and not having the capacity within the veteran's household to care for the dog. So I'm just wondering, Ms. Forbes, if you could start, and then maybe I'll come to you, Ms. McKenzie, to just talk about how that assessment is done and what supports are in place, not only for the veteran, but for the family to support the service dog.
So For our part of it, we actually use the prescriber guidelines that were developed by Christine Anderson. She was also my co-chair in the CGSB committee. That is our first line of defense, because that allows us to ensure that there's been a conversation with the medical professional about a state of readiness and if it's the best fit. We often get looped into those conversations, so it doesn't happen just between our clients and their treatment professionals. It's usually a three-way conversation between National Service Dogs, the treatment professional. Built into our policy based on the ADI PTSD standards for military, we are required to make sure that we are engaging on that mental health piece. That emergency supports are put in place, so there's at least two other individuals in that client's circle of support that we can reach out to if they're in crisis, to deal not only with the safety of the dog, but to make sure that the client is safe. And that is built into the ADI PTSD standards for military. Making sure our follow-up process is intensive and that the clients are well followed up on, and that we made the commitment at NSD to have a mental health professional on staff, not just on standby. And I'll leave Laura with, sorry, I think I probably blew through your 2 minutes.
I'll just say, yes, we follow pretty well the same thing that Danielle does. We have a lifetime membership for our members. Most of our members come back even when they're done. So we see them typically on a weekly or bi-weekly visit, because we call it the Canine Country and Family. Our members just keep coming back. But we do the same things. We talk to their health providers. We have meetings with them. We talk about what tasks are going to be required for the dog. And then we have people that we can call if we think the person is in crisis. So same type of thing.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have MP Doherty for 5 minutes, please. Oh, and I see, Medrick, do you have your hand up there? Is it a technical question or you wanted to respond? You're good? Oh, you're on mute, sir.
Sorry. If you look in the prescriber guidelines, you will find that the service dog readiness decision tree is the second of 3 decision trees, and I think that will lay to rest a lot of these issues.
Thank you. Sorry, MP Doherty, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I just want to start off by saying thank you to our guests that are here, our witnesses that are here, and Mr. Cousineau, thank you for your testimony today. Thank you for outing me again about my friend MJ and her service dog that aptly was able to detect that I was facing some anxiety regarding my bill. Can you tell us where Ty is right now? You're on mute, sir.
Ty has wandered back and forth between sitting on my feet and watching my wife, who is watching the testimony, because both of us, if you can imagine, after dedicating almost 8 solid years to your life to this, it's a pretty emotional issue, and she's worked me hard. In fact, earlier we had to remove her from the room because she was becoming so animated that I wouldn't have been able to continue my testimony.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I asked that question, because I sensed that at the very beginning, and I know firsthand. I do want to share another story or another example with my colleagues that are here, and that is a friend of mine by the name of Jason Bird, who is an Ottawa firefighter. Jason is about 6'8", a giant of a man, and when I first met him, I was speaking at a first responder conference with respect to post-traumatic stress disorder and my bill C211, and Jason was a shell of a man at that. He could hardly stand up without shaking. PTSD absolutely had racked his both emotional and physical well-being. But 16 months later, he was given a service dog by the name of Blaze. There's Ty right there. And Jason was able to come out of his house without being impacted by all that was going on. And Blaze absolutely transformed his life. And so, Mr. Cousineau, I'm wondering if you could tell me, we talk about it so much about trust and the emotional support that these animals, these dogs, provide. And I'm just wondering if you can touch on that a little bit more about how Ty has transformed your life.
Yes, I thank you for the opportunity for that. Sorry for outing you. I didn't.
That's okay.
I considered the fact that you had spoke about it first as my license to be able to bring it up here, and I should have checked beforehand.
No, 100%. You got it.
No, my apologies. However, because of the physical security threats that accompany PTSD, whether it's a combat threat, whether it's a military sexual trauma scenario, whether it's search and rescue, whatever happens to be the underlying cause of the trauma, oftentimes it involves a loss of personal security, and with that comes trust. Mm-hmm. In the military, we're taught three things. When your HPA axis fires, you either fight, flight, or freeze. Well, doing nothing is frowned upon. Running away is frowned upon even more. So we fight. And that's why veterans become very aggressive when they become threatened. It has been bred into us. It's not that we're bad people. It's just the way. I'm sorry. The military made us the way we are. I won't apologize for it. It's necessary. However, now that we've been made that way, when we are done, we need to find a soft landing place for us to land on. And that includes our dog. I did not trust anybody, nobody. And that includes family members. It was dark. And it took a long, long time for me to reestablish some of that trust. And unfortunately, my work in this space, I have dealt with the betrayals of being told we are going to do certain things on this file and we haven't. And it hurts. And it causes that. However, now, because I do have Ty, and you saw her come check in on me here a minute ago, I can function in ways that I had not in years. And I need to share with you, this is another one of our service dog handlers. His wife was approached by neighbors after he had gotten paired with his service dog. And the comment was, "My God, you have a husband. We thought you were a single parent." And that I don't need to tell you anything else. That's what you need to know. And that happens to be one of Mr. Sampson's constituents.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next for 5 minutes, MP Fillmore, please.
Thanks, Chair. And moreover, thanks to all of the witnesses for giving your time and testimony today. It's very much appreciated. Medrick, it's nice to see you again. You may remember we spent an evening together at Pier 21 a couple of years ago, and Ty was under the table with us that night. And you taught me something that day, and you're teaching me more today. So thank you very much. Although my questions are going to be for some others, they're going to build on something you said, which is that there is an off-the-shelf option here. So I wonder for Ms. Forbes and Ms. McKenzie, because we're in a Canadian context here, so for my forgiveness, Ms. O'Brien, we heard from previous witnesses that this is really quite complex, right? The dog needs to be trained, the trainer of the dog needs to be trained, the service person who's going to be with the dog needs to be trained to be with the dog. There's the prescriber, the prescribing regimen. This is quite a complex thing. And I just wonder if you could, in that context, either one of you, Ms. Forbes or Ms. McKenzie, talk about if there is a sort of an off-the-shelf option that can achieve that kind of complexity in the Canadian context.
Do you want to go first this time, Laura, or do you want me to dive in? I'll dive in. So off the shelf in terms of there's already pieces of the puzzle in place. I'm going to go back to what Laura said in her opening remarks. There's a few different lanes, right? So if you want to qualify programs that do all of those things on like one-stop shopping, and Wounded Warriors brings in programs to do that, but so does ADI. You can have something in place that can help you to understand that dogs coming out of certain programs are fully qualified, legitimate dogs. Where the challenge comes in is the team end of it. For dogs that aren't coming out of programs that are more easy to put standards in place and hold to accountability, where I think I've seen in this space things get difficult is people who aren't going through programs like mine or like Laura's, and they don't have guidelines or a mechanism to qualify their dogs legitimately for doing the good work. So I think for you guys, it's twofold. There's a lane that's service provider oriented and one that's owner trained oriented, because they are a section of your constituency that is demanding access to Veterans Affairs and the greater community, right? And currently, they're underrepresented, and it's not my job. I don't service those folks, but that is from the standards board piece that I was a party to. They have to be dealt with separately. The standards we have for programs do not cross over well into dealing with individuals. The outcome standards that Laura referenced for the teams is what we were working on at CGSB to address that, and it is sitting on a shelf in Ottawa. And it's darn good. We did good work on that. Medrick's not wrong.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Ms. McKenzie?
There. Yeah, so Danielle has hit on the big problem. The majority of my clients that I have are in our owner trained program. And the reason behind this is because we can service a lot more people and get more dogs with more handlers. Now, that being said, there is a huge process that we have to go through to make sure that this handler is ready to be able to train. We don't get like a group of dogs and or puppies from one litter. We specifically test specific puppies. So maybe out of 12 puppies, we take 2 and give these to handlers. So there is a whole bunch of pieces of the puzzle that I really can't explain in just 5 minutes. But one of the biggest problems out there right now is that we are just overwhelmed with the amount of people that require dogs. And our system, how we have been having great results. It is owner assisted, and that means through public access. Like we have 2 trainers that go out with a maximum of 4 people to help our handlers go out in public, because that's the biggest thing. We want to make sure that they aren't traumatized when they go out. If we see that they are being traumatized, we have somebody that can go with them and take them away from the crowds. If they start to disassociate, we have somebody there that can help them. All of my handlers have been trained by me and our service dog owners. A lot of them no longer need their service dogs because they're maybe on their 3rd dog with me, and now they can do things without them. So they are there. They understand what's happening to the person, and they are there to help facilitate if something does go wrong. So there's a whole bunch of pieces to the puzzle. You can't just say where it doesn't work is when you just have trainers that don't understand the process that try to train the dogs.
Thank you.
Like I believe.
Sorry.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Sorry, I have to cut you off there. We're
No
getting close
problem.
to near the last 15 minutes of the meeting, so I got to be a little more litigious. Up next, we have MP Davidson for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, I think I'm going to be taking Mr. Davidson's spot, if that's okay.
By all means, Mr. Broussard,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and sorry we didn't know. I want to ask a very difficult question, but I think it's an important question when it comes to the issue of service dogs, and that relates. And I want to address this to all 4 of you, so it should take up the 5 minutes. But the issue of veteran suicide, having a service dog at their side, from your experience, maybe you can address that issue and how it's helped veterans who would otherwise have suicide ideation say to themselves, you know what? No, not today. And maybe we can start with Medrick and then go around. Please give enough time for everybody to answer. You're going to have to come off mute again, Medrick. You're still on mute, sir.
There we go.
Yeah.
Having the dubious distinction of being a veteran who has survived multiple attempts on my life.
I know it's emotional. I know it was a tough question, Medrick. But it needs to be asked.
You're goddamn right. It needs to be asked. So you got to ask yourself, what the hell is so goddamn powerful that people that would willingly step into harm's way for other people try and kill themselves? Because when you can answer that, you can answer why we need these dogs. And if you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be invited to the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Danielle, Laura, Sheila, anyone?
I can go next. In terms of that piece of it, I mean, suicide is a very individual thing, but making sure that our team is suicide aware and responsive is part of what we do at NSD and trauma informed. But in terms of the anecdotal evidence we have seen from our clients and heard from our clients is the dogs give them back their routine. They put them on a healthier path on that routine. Is that going to work 100% of the time with dog guide or service dog users in the PTSD field? No. There's so many mitigating factors, comorbidities around addiction and other challenges that it's a multifaceted puzzle. But the dogs certainly don't hurt, and in some cases can be the difference between somebody wanting to continue or suiciding.
Laura?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the biggest thing is for the veteran or civilian with PTSD is that they disengage from society. And what we have found with the dogs is it helps them reconnect, through training, through being with a group. It helps them find their voice and be part of something. It makes them feel that they're not alone. And that's where we have found the biggest change. They have someone there who they can count on all the time by their side. And it just makes them more comfortable. And also, like, embarrassment is a huge part of it. And lots of people will not hug another person or talk to another person. They will hug and talk to their dog.
Sheila, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I have a few statistics or some things that just came out of the VA study that was released early 2021. That VA study confirmed that there was a reduced suicide ideation and clinical depression in all veterans that had service dogs as opposed to emotional support dogs. And they also noted there was over a 3-point improvement on the PTSD checklist, which is the test that's used widely to assess somebody's PTSD. And the last statistic or point that I want to bring up is from the annual suicide report at the VA. They are saying that although there's a prevalence of veterans with PTSD, the regular treatments such as drugs and therapy don't do as well as they do with other mental health problems. So it's very interesting. So I think that veterans knew this before we did, that a dog is what they need.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. This
Thank
has been a really valuable session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Up next for 5 minutes, MP Lalonde, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. I guess for me to help me better understand this issue, and certainly this discussion has been extremely valuable and helpful. I have a few questions, and Mrs. O'Brien, maybe I'll start with you. You've addressed some of the standard in the USA, and your role and everything, I wanted to maybe ask you if you could speak to what advice you would give us in Canada when it comes to establishing a standards for service dogs here.
I think that the best advice would be to utilize the PTSD standards that ADI has already worked 8 years on. And again, they don't deal with just dog training. They deal with all components that are involved with these veterans with PTSD. And, you know, we were talking about how a dog makes a difference in getting people out in the world. But also, if the dog is not the right kind of dog, it hurts the veteran. So we have to be aware of that too. And these standards, they cover all of that. They insist that you use a dog that invites the public in. So if you have a dog that's snarling and got its hackles up, it will not invite the public in. I mean, that's one of the prime objectives for someone with PTSD, is to interact with the public. So, you know, just there's a lot of components to it. It's not just dog training, it's dog temperament, it's veteran readiness. Some veterans are not ready to have a dog at this point. You know, when they apply, they're just not, whether they're addicted or, you know, they don't have enough get up and go to be with a dog. You have to have mental health component up there as well. So
thanks.
I recommend that.
Thank you. I'm also curious, and you might have informed us, but I might have not quite understand, who pays for the dog and their training in the United States, and how do you meet your demand?
Well, all the programs are nonprofit that are in ADI, so I can speak for the 106 programs that I oversee. And they raise funding themselves.
Okay. So it's through basically fundraising activities, individuals supporting these initiatives regionally across the United States.
Yes, and I know this is going to shock you, but my program, it costs over $60,000 for one team. And that's everything, flying the team in, training the dog, keeping the team accommodated. We have a larger program and we have dorm rooms. So it's $60,000 for every team, and the veteran does not pay 1 cent.
Well, I'm glad to hear that our veterans, are not footing the bill for this. So thank you for all the work that's happened over there. Mr. Cousineau, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, I represent Orléans, a community within the national capital of Ottawa, and we do have many veterans here. And I don't come from a veterans family, but I want to say from the bottom of my heart how appreciative we are of your service to our country, sir. And thank you for your testimony and sharing. I have a very quick question for you, and I want to make sure I can pick this up quickly. And I know my time is coming up, but I want to ask you, how would we know that someone needs a service dog instead, for example, an emotional support dog animal? So I want briefly, thank you. You're on mute, sir.
Damn aviators, I should know better than to step on the heel-toe switch. Anyway, the short version is a service dog is specifically trained to mitigate the disabling symptomology that a handler has from their PTSD. That is why the prescriber guidelines are so important, because that is the linkage between the schools that are going to provide the training and marry the team up and get them pointed in the right direction. There's approximately 53 different things that a service dog can do for PTSD. Problem is that 3 to 5 of those are going to be the major ones that a veteran is going to deal with on a daily basis. And there's where we have to focus our efforts. You can't teach a dog 53 commands that he isn't going to use, because after a few months, the dog won't respond and the handler won't remember.
Mhm.
So it is absolutely imperative that the medical professionals become involved in this particular prescribing process. Because if not, what they're saying is that we know you do this amazing stuff, so just go do it without medical oversight. That doesn't make sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Up next for 2.5 minutes, MP Desilets. Luke.
I apologize. Before the chair cuts me off, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all the witnesses for an absolutely tremendous meeting today. So here's my question, Ms. Mackenzie. It seems evident that we need to respond to the demand. There's just not enough dogs. There seems to be the political will, there seems to be the money there and ready. So what do we need to do? Very quickly, because I have other questions, please. How do we address the demand issue? First, do we need more trainers? What do we need?
We need testing for the dogs that are being trained by the trainers that are out there, and licensing. So we need some kind of program.
On n'a pas de traduction, Monsieur le Président.
We can't hear the interpretation, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, rather.
Up 1 second. We have a bit of a problem with translation.
Sure.
I'm just going to test right now. We're good? Okay. Can you hear me being translated? Luke? Okay.
Yes, I can hear. No worries.
Wind the clock back.
On reprend le temps, s'il vous plaît.
Sure. I think what really needs to be is that we need to have some kind of testing so we can monitor the standards. That would allow, there are trainers out there. We're not ADI accredited, but we are training to that standard, and we need to have a testing and licensing program established. So these dogs can be tested with their handlers and see if they, so then you know that they're going to meet the standards of public safety. Standards will not stop fake service dogs, because under the human rights laws right now, anyone can get a doctor's note, they can slap a vest on their dog and say, I have a service dog. If we don't have any kind of way to test this dog, there is no way to enforce it.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Luke.
Sorry once again. Ms. O'Brien, you have international knowledge, at least North American expertise and knowledge. However, based on your knowledge, do you have examples of countries that are succeeding, not in necessarily meeting the demand, but at least approaching the possibility of striking a balance between supply and demand? And if so, what do they do to achieve this?
That's time, but I'll allow for a brief response, please.
Unfortunately, the demand is out there everywhere. So I don't have any solution to that particular problem.
Okay, thank you. And for the last word, I think for today's meeting, we'll go to MP Blaney for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could come to you, Mr. Cousineau, one more time. You talked about in your last answer having the medical professionals involved, and I think that's super important what you just said. But I guess I'm trying to understand, what is the process? So a veteran reaches out to your organization or to one of the other organizations. Who assesses whether the veteran is prepared, what supports need to be put into place, and how do they assess that? What is that process?
You weren't on mute, but you put yourself on mute.
You muted yourself.
You're good. You're good now.
It's a good day, sir. It's a good day.
Now you know why I need adult supervision, i.e., known as TIE. So when an individual reaches out, one of the things that has to happen is that within Pause for Thought, we have an intake and screening process that includes getting the prescriptions from the doctors to become involved in this process, because failure to do that literally means that we could be providing to the individual something that is literally contraindicated by the treating clinician. And that's why we really need to be cognizant of the fact that they have to become involved in this. You know, the people in the dog industry, we all love dogs, and they do an amazing job training them, but they are not medical professionals, and they are not qualified mental health professionals. We need access to those. Think about this. PTSD is acknowledged to be one of the most complex and debilitating mental health injuries that there is because of its comorbidities. Anybody who thinks there's a simple solution to a complex problem like that is dreaming. That's why it's an all hands on deck scenario.
Thank you. That's all of my questions, Chair. I really appreciate that answer. It really helped me understand.
Thank you very much, MP Blaney. That will bring us to the end of today's meeting. I want to take an opportunity to thank all of the witnesses for being here today. This is a tough conversation, and I appreciate each and every one of you spending the time with us and helping us draft this report. We know that we've got one more meeting with this study, and it's been very educational. There's not been a meeting we've had where we haven't walked away. I haven't walked away learning something new on this. And I see Laura has a friend to join us here today. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all the technicians and folks in Ottawa that allow this type of meeting to happen during this pandemic. And MP Wagenthal.
Sure. Just when you're done, I just have one question just of the committee.
Certainly. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So I missed last meeting because of responsibilities in the House, and I understand there were a lot of issues, technical issues, that cut significantly into the time for the individuals that were part of that particular day of testimony. And I know that specifically we lost time for the psychiatrist to be able to be part of the conversation. Wondering if Susan Brock could be included in another opportunity for her to present.
Let's talk. I'll talk to the clerk about what would be entailed in something like that, and if it would make sense to include in our last meeting. And with that, if there's no objection, I will adjourn today's meeting. Excellent. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Stay safe.